Before I begin, I would like to quickly add that I'm going to be scrolling on my mouse a little bit. That's only because my computer will shut off if I don't. I'm getting it fixed. So if you see me scrolling, I'll have it fixed by the time of the presentation. So here it goes. Many people may have heard of the now famous painting of Starry Night. Although it's famous now, it wasn't always that way. Did you know the painter Vincent van Gogh never sold a piece of artwork in his life? Why is that? From a young age, the visual arts have always fascinated me. The ability to tell a story or unveil a deeper meaning about our life through visual arts has opened my eyes to a whole new world. Because of this, I prioritize my research to finding factual information to relay back to my audience. You may be wondering why out of all the famous artists do you want to learn about Vincent van Gogh? Some reasons may include how his artistic ability was before his time, how he was able to see the world through different eyes and relay that back through art, or maybe you're interested to understand his struggles with mental illness. Either way, we will look at a summarized version of Vincent van Gogh's life and how it contributed to his art, starting from the beginning of his life to his death, and looking at his art career. Not a lot is known about Vincent van Gogh in his early years. He was born March 30th, 1853 in Zundert, Netherlands. He was the eldest son of a Protestant clergyman. From a book, Tragic Life of Vincent van Gogh, his father was thought to have a gentle nature. Vincent had 5 younger siblings. Arguably, his favorite sibling was his younger brother Theo. Sources vary on what kind of kid Vincent was. Most say he was a fairly quiet kid. An article by the American Journal of Psychiatrics noticed from a photograph of young Vincent that specific physical features and early temperamental changes suggest he may have suffered from early brain injury, most likely during childbirth. At a young age, he never showed artistic ability. He received a couple years of scattered education, and then at 16, joined one of his uncles to work at an art dealing company. He worked there for 6 years, and then later lost interest and was dismissed. He then spent a couple scattered years working in a school, as a preacher, and he even worked in a bookstore, all ending in either dismissal or loss of interest. During the struggle of finding a career, he went through a dark period, became deeply depressed and disconnected from most of his family, until when he was 27, decided to devote himself to becoming an artist. Although he had little to no experience or training as an artist, he felt as if it was his spiritual calling. He attended an art school in Brussels for a couple months and then moved back with his parents, along the way working on his art. Later, he moved all along the Netherlands working on his art and alienating his family along the way due to some of his decisions. Although he may have alienated some of his family, he never lost connections with his brother Theo. During this time as a struggling artist, Theo provided financial, but more importantly, he provided moral support for Vincent van Gogh to pursue his ambition. The Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam has recorded 891 out of 2,000 of Vincent's letters, mainly all addressed to his brother Theo, and Theo, with great care, kept them all. At the starting of his painting career from 1880 to 86, he focused on capturing the humanity of life. His subjects were mostly peasants and in dreary situations. One of his greatest masterpieces during this time was the Potato Eaters, completed in 1885. It shows a group of peasants surrounded by a table all eating at night. Although it seems like a dark and lifeless scene, in the peasants' faces Vincent captures a sense of community and love between them. He later moves to Paris and lives with his brother Theo in the early 1886 and embraces the bohemian lifestyle. In Paris, he will meet and become friends with different Impressionist artists who will later shift how he paints. Impressionist is basically a shift in how you paint. Impressionists you mainly paint outside, capturing landscapes and cityscapes all as it's happening. Where before, painting was all done by sketches in studios. They influenced Vincent to create lighter and brighter scenes and incorporate other principles like painting nature, outside, and painting things right as it happens. The city life in Paris became too much for Vincent, so he decided to move down south of France in a city called Arles. He worked endlessly for 15 months there and painted over 200 pictures, all with vibrant color, high saturation mass, and with radiant brightness. Throughout Vincent van Gogh's life, he has struggled with emotions. They have always seemed to be strong and uncontrollable. It wasn't until Paris that we see an increase in his mental illness. He began to have episodes of sudden terror, seizures, and lapses of consciousness. And his increase of alcohol and abstinence played a large role in his illness. His sister will later describe Vincent in this way in a letter. It seems as if he were two persons, one marvelously gifted, tender, and refined, the other egotistical and hard-hearted. It is a pity that he is his own enemy, for he makes life hard not only for others, but for himself. His mental illness became more present towards the end of his life. During this time, he famously cuts off a piece of his ear after an argument and then is hospitalized. He goes in and out of hospitalization and then, finally, willingly enters himself into an asylum at St. Remy, in 1889. There, he completed over 300 works of art and created the now famous A Starry Night. He will later write to Theo, "It is good for me to work hard, but that does not keep me from having a terrible need of, shall I say the word, yes, of religion. Then go out at night and paint the stars." He was discharged from the asylum in 1890 and spent the last 10 weeks of his life in the city Iberis under the care of his friend and physician, Paul Gatchett. After an argument with both Theo and Gatchett, Vincent van Gogh shot himself in the stomach alone in a field, later saying to friends, "I couldn't stick it any longer, so I shot myself." He died 2 days later, Theo by his side, and then 6 months later, Theo was buried right by his brother. Although this story doesn't necessarily have a happy ending, it is a story of triumph. Even while struggling with severe mental illness, Vincent pursued his call to paint, and even while in his darkest moments, found the color, brightness, and movement of our world. And then, later on, his work inspired others to show new ways to represent our world. Here's a quote from Vincent. "I put my heart and soul into my work, and have lost my mind in the process." Together we have looked at Vincent van Gogh's life from beginning to end, along the way discussing his works. Although Vincent van Gogh was not popular in his time, he was brave enough to show us the world through his eyes. I'd like to leave you with a quote. "It is good to love many things, for therein lies strength. And whomsoever loves much, performs much, and can accomplish much, and what is done with love is done well." That's in Van Gogh. Thank you for your time.